Cabins are supposed to be an escape, away from the noise, away from people, away from everything. But sometimes the thing you were trying to escape follows you there. And sometimes something is already waiting when you arrive.
I travel alone for work a few times a year, and whenever I can, I book a cabin instead of a hotel. I've been doing this for about 6 years. Nothing has ever happened. Mostly it's just quiet nights with a good book and no one bothering me. I had no reason to think this particular trip would be any different. The cabin was booked through a rental app. 4.5 stars, 40-something reviews, all positive. The host seemed responsive, answered my questions within an hour. The photos showed a small, clean, one-bedroom cabin in rural Montana. No neighbors visible. A small porch with a view of the tree line. Exactly what I wanted. I arrived on a Wednesday evening in late October. The drive-in was on an unpaved road that cut through about 2 miles of dense forest. No cell service for the last mile and a half. That part I already knew. The listing mentioned it, so I had downloaded my maps and saved the address offline before I left. The cabin was unlocked when I arrived, as the host had said it would be. Key on the kitchen counter. Everything is described. It was clean, small but comfortable. A wood-burning stove in the corner, a couch, a small dining table, a kitchenette. One bedroom with a window that faced the back tree line. A bathroom. That was it. I made myself dinner, started a fire in the stove, and settled in. That's when I noticed the logbook.
It was sitting on the small bookshelf near the door, a brown leather journal with a piece of tape on the front that said guest log in handwritten letters. I've seen these in other rentals. Hosts put them out for guests to write notes, recommendations, thoughts on their stay. I picked it up. Most of the entries were exactly what you'd expect. Couples writing about how peaceful it was, families mentioning hikes they recommended. Someone wrote a detailed note about the best spot for stargazing. Normal stuff. The last entry stopped me. It was dated 3 days before my arrival. The handwriting was different from the previous entries. Rushed, uneven, pressed hard into the page like whoever wrote it was in a hurry or frightened. It said, "There is someone in the woods. He has been outside since last night. He watches the cabin from the tree line. We tried to leave this morning and he was standing in the driveway. We went back inside. No cell service. If someone finds this, please call the police. He is still here. Please help." That was it. No name, no contact information. I read it 3 times. Then I closed the logbook and set it on the table and stood very still in the middle of the cabin. My first thought was that it was a joke. Guests playing a prank on whoever came next. My second thought was that if it was a joke, it was a very committed one. The handwriting looked genuinely distressed, shaky in places. The pen had torn slightly through the paper on the word help. My third thought was that if it wasn't a joke, the host had allowed guests to check in 3 days after this was written without telling anyone or doing anything about it. I tried calling the host. No service. I tried texting. The messages sat undelivered. I walked to the front window and looked out at the porch and the driveway and the beginning of the tree line. Nothing visible, just darkness and trees. I told myself to be rational. 3 days had passed since that entry was written. Whatever had happened, if anything had actually happened, was resolved. The previous guests had clearly left. The host had clearly been in to clean and turn over the cabin since then because it was spotless when I arrived. I went to bed. I woke up at 2 in the morning. Not because of a sound exactly, more like the absence of one. The fire had gone out while I slept, and the cabin had gone very cold and very silent. I lay in the dark for a moment, getting my bearings. Then I looked at the bedroom window. The curtain was thin, almost translucent in the right light, and on the other side of it, visible as a dark shape against the slightly lighter darkness of the night outside, was the outline of a person standing just outside the glass. Still, not moving. I did not move either. We stayed like that, me in the bed, whoever it was outside the window, for what I think was about 2 minutes, but felt like 20. Then the shape moved. Slowly, it shifted to the left, and then it was gone from the frame of the window. I grabbed my phone, useless, still no service, and my car keys, and I left. I didn't pack, I didn't turn on a light, I just went out the front door and got into my car and drove the 2 miles of unpaved road back to the highway as fast as I could manage in the dark. When I got service back, I called the police and told them everything. I sent them a photo I had taken of the logbook entry before I left. They went to the cabin the next morning. They found footprints in the soft ground outside the bedroom window, fresh, leading from the tree line to the window and back again. No one was found. No one was identified. The host never responded to my messages. The listing was removed from the rental app 2 days later. I requested a refund through the app's support system. I never got one. But more than the money, what I think about is the entry in that logbook. The people who wrote it were stuck in that cabin for at least one night with someone standing outside. They got out eventually. They must have. But they left that note for a reason. They wanted someone to know. I'm glad I found it before I stayed longer than one night. If that story gave you chills, go ahead and leave a like on the video. It genuinely helps this channel more than you know. And if something like this has ever happened to you on a road trip, drop it in the comments. My girlfriend and I are not outdoorsy people. I want to be clear about that because it matters for what happened. We don't hike, we don't camp, we had never rented a cabin before in our lives. The whole trip was her idea. She thought it would be romantic, something different, a break from our apartment in the city. I went along with it because she was excited and because I figured, how bad could it be? We found a cabin online. 2 bedrooms, a small deck, a fire pit outside, mountain views. It was listed as remote. The nearest town was about 18 miles away. That part I didn't love, but she said that was the point. We arrived on a Friday afternoon. The first thing that surprised me was how quiet it actually was. I mean that in the most absolute sense. No traffic sounds, no voices, no aircraft, just wind and trees and complete silence. I had never experienced quiet like that in my life. We unpacked, figured out the fire pit, made dinner. So far, so good. Around 7 that evening, someone knocked on the cabin door. I opened it and a man was standing on the porch. Late 50s, flannel shirt, worn work boots. He introduced himself as Dale. He said he lived just through the trees to the east and that he always liked to introduce himself when new people came to stay at the cabin. He said it was just a habit. Good to know your neighbors out here, he said. He seemed friendly, normal, the kind of person you'd expect to run into in a rural area. We invited him in for a few minutes. He had a cup of coffee at our kitchen table and told us about good hiking trails nearby, warned us that the fire pit needed a screen because sparks could carry in the wind, told us where the breaker box was in case the power went out. Practical stuff. Helpful, even. He stayed maybe 30 minutes and then said goodnight and walked back off the porch into the trees. My girlfriend said she thought he was sweet. I agreed. Nice neighbor, good start to the trip. The next morning, I was up early. While my girlfriend was still sleeping, I made coffee and stepped out onto the deck. It was just after sunrise, cold and clear, and I stood there looking out at the tree line. I started thinking about Dale and which direction he had said he lived. East, he'd said, through the trees to the east. I looked east. There was nothing there but forest. Dense, unbroken forest as far as I could see. I went back inside and pulled up the rental listing on my phone. In the description, under the section about the location, it said, and I am quoting this from memory because I read it several times, completely private, no neighboring properties within 4 miles. I searched the area on the map.
No structures, no roads, no properties of any kind in the direction Dale had pointed. I woke my girlfriend up and showed her. She suggested maybe the listing was wrong. Maybe Dale's property just wasn't showing up. I called the property management company that handled the rental. I got a voicemail, but left a message asking about neighboring properties. They called back 2 hours later. The woman I spoke to was very matter-of-fact about it. There were no neighboring properties within 4 miles in any direction. That was one of the selling points of this particular cabin. They had owned and managed it for 11 years. In that time, no neighbor named Dale had ever introduced himself to any guests. Ever. We left that afternoon. While we were loading the car, my girlfriend pointed to the tree line to the east. There was a path through the trees that I hadn't noticed before. Narrow, barely wide enough for a person, but clearly used. The ground was worn down. The branches on either side were pushed back.
Someone had walked that path many times. We didn't follow it. We didn't want to know where it went. We got in the car and drove the 18 miles to town and kept going until we hit the highway. On the drive home, my girlfriend said something that I haven't been able to stop thinking about. She said, he knew where the breaker box was. Not a guess, not a general area. He knew exactly where it was, which means Dale had been inside that cabin before. We reported everything to the property management company and to the local sheriff's department. The management company sent someone to check the cabin. They found the path through the trees. It led to a small clearing about a half-mile into the forest. In the clearing, there was evidence that someone had been camping there. Not recently, but regularly. A fire ring, a weathered tarp strung between 2 trees, empty food cans. Whoever Dale was, he had been living in that forest. And every time someone came to stay at the cabin, he introduced himself as the neighbor. If you thought that was unsettling, story 3 is worse. But first, hit the like.
I need to start by saying that I am not a paranoid person. I don't see threats where there aren't any. I don't catastrophize. I'm the kind of person who, when something goes wrong, immediately looks for the most logical explanation. My wife would tell you the same thing about me. And she would also tell you that what happened on that drive changed something in me permanently. This was 3 summers ago. My wife Karen, our 2 kids, 11 and 8 at the time, and I were driving up to a cabin we had rented for the week. It was about a 4-hour drive from our house, mostly highway for the first 2 hours and then winding mountain roads for the rest. We had rented the same cabin 2 years before and loved it. Remote, quiet, surrounded by trees, no neighbors within a mile. Exactly what we needed. We left early on a Saturday morning, around 6 a.m., to beat the traffic. The kids fell asleep almost immediately in the backseat. Karen was navigating on her phone. I had a large coffee in the cup holder, and I was feeling good about the week ahead. About 40 minutes into the drive, I noticed a car behind us. Dark blue sedan, older model. It was keeping a steady distance. Not too close, not too far. I registered it and then forgot about it. Cars follow each other on highways all the time. It means nothing.
An hour later, I took our first exit off the highway. It was a smaller state route that cut through a couple of small towns before hitting the mountain roads. Less traffic, more scenic. We had taken this route before. The blue sedan took the same exit. I noticed it, but still told myself it was nothing. Lots of people use that exit. It doesn't mean anything. We stopped at a gas station in the first small town to fill up and let the kids stretch their legs. I pulled in, got out, and started pumping gas. Karen took the kids inside to use the restroom. While I was standing at the pump, I looked out at the road. The blue sedan drove past slowly. Not into the station, just past it. Slowly enough that I noticed, and then it kept going. I stood there for a moment, watching it disappear around the bend. When Karen came back out, I told her what I had seen.
She said it was probably a coincidence, and I agreed with her out loud. Internally, I wasn't as sure. We got back on the road. 20 minutes later, on a long, straight stretch of the state route, I checked my mirrors. The blue sedan was behind us again. Same distance, same pace, like it had been sitting somewhere waiting for us to pass. I didn't say anything to Karen yet. I didn't want to alarm her if I was wrong, but I started paying close attention. Every turn we made, I checked the mirror. Every time the road curved, I watched to see if the sedan would appear behind us again.
It always did. By the time we hit the mountain roads, narrow, winding, barely 2 lanes in some places, I was certain. This car had been behind us for almost 3 hours. It had taken every single turn we took. It had slowed when we slowed. It had stopped. I was now almost sure of it when we stopped at the gas station. I told Karen. She went quiet for a moment and then turned around to look through the rear window. The sedan was visible about a quarter mile back, moving at exactly our speed around the curves. She told me to call the police. I told her I didn't know what to tell them. A car is driving behind us? That's not a crime. We didn't have their plate number because every time I tried to look, the curves of the road made it impossible to read clearly. We kept driving. The kids were awake now, looking at their tablets, completely unaware. When we finally turned onto the private dirt road that led to our cabin, a road that is not on most maps, a road that you would only know about if you were specifically going to our cabin or one of the 2 others on that same stretch, I held my breath. The blue sedan turned onto the dirt road behind us. Karen grabbed my arm.
We drove the last half mile to the cabin in complete silence. I pulled into the clearing in front of the cabin and stopped. Karen quietly told the kids to stay in the car. We sat there and watched the dirt road. The blue sedan appeared at the edge of the clearing. It stopped. Just sat there at the tree line with its engine running. We couldn't see the driver. The windshield was too dirty and the sun was hitting it at an angle. I called 911, told them where we were and what had happened. The dispatcher told me to stay in my vehicle and that she would send someone out. While we were waiting, the sedan's engine cut off. Nobody got out. It just sat there at the tree line for 22 minutes. I timed it while we sat in our car in the clearing 30 yards away. Then, the engine started again. The sedan backed slowly down the dirt road and disappeared into the trees.
A sheriff's deputy arrived 40 minutes later. He searched the dirt road and the surrounding tree line. He found tire tracks where the sedan had been parked. He found a cigarette butt on the ground near the tracks, still warm. Whoever it was had been sitting there watching our cabin while we waited inside our car. We stayed the week. I don't know why. Maybe because I didn't want my kids to see me afraid, or maybe because some part of me believed it was over. But every night that week, before I went to sleep, I walked the perimeter of the cabin with a flashlight. And every night, I found fresh tire tracks at the end of the dirt road. They never came closer than that, but they came back every single night.
3 cabins, 3 trips that should have been peaceful. They weren't. If you take anything from these stories, trust the feeling when something is off. The car that turns when you turn, the entry in a logbook that someone left behind, the neighbor who knows too much. Subscribe for new true horror stories every single week. Drop your own experience in the comments. Stay safe out there.